Tariffs have dominated the news this week. And there's been multiple stories about hardware companies, computer hardware companies, video game manufacturers, and the like, dealing with changing tariffs landscape. And they've been all over the news, the cable news, the mainstream news. It's been nonstop. And there have been a couple of very strangely political statements that have come out of some of those computer companies. Noteworthy, Framework Computer, who makes more repairable laptops and the like, they made a bit of a political statement about it as well. And all of it seemed very strange to me. Now, many of you may not know my background. Before I became whatever it is I am now, the tech journalism that I do nowadays, I used to work at computer companies. I started out in engineering and eventually became VP of engineering, and then moved over to marketing and became like VP of marketing and director of marketing and all sorts of things. But I had lots of executive titles at computer companies building computer hardware components, computer laptops, smartphones, and more in multiple countries and shipping to multiple countries. And this meant that I had to spend a great deal of time understanding tariffs and how they worked between so many countries and how it impacted building, say, computer laptops in Taiwan or China or other locales. And so this is just an area I know a tremendous amount about, right? You might hear a lot of people online right now talking about tariffs that don't deal with import-export tariffs relating to the electronics industry, other than what they read on the news and what they buy down at the store. This is actually in my line of work prior to becoming a tech journalist. So when I saw Framework Computer announce on April 7th that because of changing tariffs, they were going to be pausing U.S. sales of some of their laptops, this raised a lot of red flags for me. And I posted a few things over on X that I'm going to read to you now, and I've got some additional thoughts as well. But before I do that, I want you to put aside everything you think about tariffs, right? Because we're not going to get into, are tariffs good or bad? What I want to talk to you today is about how those realistically impact computer production, computer component production, and shipping computers from one country to another. And there's a lot of clearly misconceptions out there and a lot of myths floating around, including those put forth by companies like Framework Computer. And I think it's worth people understanding how really all of this works. So I'm going to read a few statements to you now that I made over on X, and then we'll go from there. Framework is pausing sales of some laptop models in the USA because of tariffs. This is truly peculiar and doesn't pass the sniff test. Number one, the price can be adjusted on the imported product to compensate for the tariff. That's how it works, and the math is incredibly simple. Number two, the USA is not the only country that imposes import tariffs on Taiwan, which is where Framework does a large percentage of their production. In fact, most countries have tariffs with Taiwan. And I've included a very partial list as a screenshot. Let me see if I've got this list here. Here's a list of some countries that have tariffs with Taiwan. It's everything from China and Japan, South Korea, India, Vietnam, Australia, Malaysia, Philippines, blah, 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 blah. Go on and on and on. It's most countries. In fact, Framework already has been dealing with tariffs, many far more complex than the Taiwan to US import tariffs, even that are changing over the last week or so, for quite some time, which means this is nothing new for them, right? This isn't surprising. And number four, Framework is not ceasing all sales in the US, just specific models, which makes this look more like an excuse for some other reason. This smells like a political stunt to me. Framework is a US company. They're based out of San Francisco, but they do their manufacturing, the bulk of it, in Taiwan. If they built their computers in the USA, they would avoid import tariffs into the USA, but they don't and they won't because Taiwan is cheap to build this stuff in. And it's worth noting that I've worked for multiple computer hardware companies, including at the executive level, where we had to deal with import tariffs going multiple different directions. And I can speak on the subject of building computers in one country, in one country and selling in another with a reasonable level of authority. Nearly every nation has tariffs with nearly every other nation. Every one is different, and many are in a constant state of flux. And yes, tariffs can be annoying to calculate and properly document, but it's nothing a good spreadsheet can't solve. In short, this doesn't smell right. Is it a political stunt or cover for a different motivation? I put this out there because it was weird, right? It didn't seem quite right, because Framework's been selling computers for a while now, for a few years. They're not really a long-term company, but they've been around for a couple years, and they understand tariffs. They have to understand tariffs because they've been dealing with import tariffs for quite some time. I continue. To put this Framework pausing U.S. sales because of tariff story into perspective, nearly every nation on Earth has import tariffs on electronics. I want to pause this for a second. There are 195, depending on how you count them, sovereign nations on Earth. Give or take, some people have a slightly different list. Roughly 190 of those currently have import tariffs. Right? So, and then continuing, the vast majority of those nations had new or modified tariffs on electronics over the last several years, right? So over the last, let's say 2 years or 10 years, however many, the last couple years, most of those nations that have import tariffs, which is almost every one of them, had either brand new or significantly modified tariffs that dealt with electronic components, computers, computer components, and the like. And that's just the last couple of years. When those tariffs have changed, sometimes there was significant advance notice of the change. Sometimes. Other times there was no notice at all. And I want to say this flat out. In my years of working in a variety of companies that dealt with components, finished laptops, smartphones, across the board, sometimes tariff changes would occur literally as stuff was getting loaded onto a plane or a ship. Not a joke, right? Happens all the time. In fact, I believe in 2024, there were, I don't know what, 40 some odd significant tariff changes, not the United States, but other countries to other countries and other countries to the, I mean, all over the place, right? So these sorts of changes happen constantly. We're talking sometimes every couple days, sometimes multiple changes in a month of tariffs between these nations. It's constant. When those tariffs have changed, sometimes there was there's advance notice, right? Sometimes there's not. All of this includes nations which Framework has not in any way paused their sales to. Canada, UK, Germany, France, on and on and on. They haven't paused it now, and they haven't paused it previously, including at times when some of those nations have changed electronics imports tariffs dramatically, right? Even when that's happened, they still haven't made modifications. So with that in mind, consider this. When was the last time you heard of a consumer electronics company loudly proclaiming, we will stop selling to this country, to the United States, because of tariffs, and plastered that statement across their social media, accompanied by a bunch of silly memes, which what do they do? They put this headache one up about how tariffs give you a headache all over your brain and all sorts of things. When was the last time you saw that? And I'm going to repeat this. In 2024, as one of so many examples, President Biden imposed rather significant new tariffs on China, specifically related to electronics, including many different computer components. Yet tariffed electronics companies continued to sell into the United States from China. No companies throwing social media tantrums, declaring a pause in U.S. sales with goofy memes about how much tariffs are hurting them. Now, sometimes prices adjusted, right? RAM prices go up, go down. CPU prices go up, go down. Certain case prices go up, go down. That's common. That's regular. That happens all the time. But saying flat out, we aren't going to sell into this country anymore because into the USA, you can't buy your laptops anymore because a tariff changed. That's bizarre. That's brand new. So maybe you like tariffs, right? Maybe you don't. Maybe you hate tariffs. Maybe tariffs are a good idea. Maybe they're not. Irrelevant to the story. Totally irrelevant. Put it off to the side. From the perspective of an electronics manufacturer building and assembling in other nations such as China or Taiwan, because those are the big ones, selling into the United States of America. There is no practical difference, none whatsoever, between this month's tariffs changes and the tariff changes that have occurred on nearly a monthly basis, impacting almost every, with like one or two exceptions, almost every nation on Earth for decades. So it's worth asking why the response is different with this specific round of tariffs adjustments. The only plausible explanation I can think of is that this was done to make a political statement because Trump is bad. I can't think of another good reason because I'm seeing it coming out of multiple sectors. I've reached out to Framework, both publicly and privately, to give them the chance to clarify if my analysis is incorrect. They have not responded thus far at all. No response at all. I want to take a pause here for a second, and as these tariff changes have occurred, this is a side note. It's just very amusing to me. As these changes have occurred over the last week, it's been a little roller coastery, right? Not the first tariffs roller coaster, but definitely the most high profile one that I can remember. This is the most high profile swingy tariff change that the news has really covered on almost like a kid falls down a well and the news has a 24-hour camera on the well waiting for Timmy to get pulled out of the well, right? It's one of those moments, right? Will we save baby Jessica? It's one of those sorts of moments, but about tariffs changes. But it's not the first time, even in the last 3 to 4 years, where tariffs have changed on an almost daily basis as countries renegotiate with each other. It happens constantly, right? So it's interesting. I went over to Mastodon. I went over to Mastodon because that's where all the nerds that are extreme leftists hang out. Mastodon is the place. It's the Fediverse, the Mastodon social network. That's where you want to go if you want to see open source Linux programmers, etc., who are extreme leftists just go on unhinged rants. If you want to see that and take really great screenshots, you can't get any better than Mastodon. So I went over to Mastodon because I was looking for information on some other responses to other stories I'm working on, and I couldn't help but notice that a ton of people were furious earlier this week about how bad tariffs are, right? So there was a lot of people who were on the extreme left who were just yelling about how tariffs are the worst and Trump voters are getting what they deserve because they voted for Trump and Trump's implementing tariffs and tariffs are bad and tariffs are going to destroy us all. I saw people talking about how tariffs were going to destroy a democracy. And then I saw a writer, a tech journalist from LWN.net, Linux Weekly News, named Joe Brockmeyer. He posted a series of posts over on Mastodon talking about how awful Trump's tariff bull beep are and swearing about the bad tariffs from Trump and how bad they are because, and he uses an example, those Framework laptops weren't going to be sold in the United States because of them, right? Well, then he made that post. A few moments later, like 10 minutes later, it was Framework announced that because the tariffs had changed again and in a different way, they paused some tariffs, Trump did, that Framework was going to be selling those laptops in the United States after all. To which the same journalist posted that Trump pausing tariffs doesn't really change much, and then proceeded, along with a number of other people, to go on rants. The same people have been yelling about how bad tariffs are, about how awful it is that Trump paused tariffs. So it's the same people on Mastodon, tech journalists, yelling about Trump is evil because he imposed tariffs and Trump is evil because he took away tariffs. Same people. It was entertaining to me. I had to share it with you guys a little bit. All right, back to the main thing we're talking about here. So let's talk about China a little bit. Because with all of this going on, let me see, did I include some of the screenshots here? Yes, I did. I want to show you this. So Framework Computer, and I'm not meaning to pick on Framework here. They've just been very public in an almost kind of strange way, in some of their statements, because they post memes and whatnot about this stuff, about how the tariffs, how they're adjusting their business because of tariffs. So it's worth noting them. They came out and posted after the tariffs with Taiwan, which is where they do a lot of their assembly, were paused and lifted. They announced that, yes, they're going to sell those laptops in the United States again. Okay, great. But then they posted this. For our lowest priced base systems, we're unable to absorb the remaining 10% tariff. Ordering is still paused for U.S. customers. They have since changed that, but they were making changes constantly. Many of our modules are manufactured in China, which now face higher tariffs. And now that's true. China now faces higher import tariffs with the United States, right? So now China importing in goods getting imported into the United States from China now face well over 100% tariffs. Pretty significant tariffs. On these items, we are keeping elevated pricing to now cover the tariff cost. We'll continue to monitor this situation and update pricing as needed. This includes China origin modules like bezels, expansion cards, the framework laptop 16 input modules, and so on. So they then we're talking about how they don't have a lot of control over this because of the pricing with the imports on the tariffs from China. It's a little bit of a weird statement considering most of those are actually getting shipped from China to Taiwan. And so depending on how the tariffs work out and how the particulars of the assembly is being done, those payments are really dealing with the Taiwan and China import tariffs. There's a bunch of things to deal with there. However, put all that to the side for a moment. I'm going to read this little statement I made to everyone over on X, to all of you, because it deals with how ridiculously stupid it is if you're an American company to build computer components in China. And I really mean that. It is just flat out dumb. Now seems like a good moment to talk about manufacturing computer components in China and what an absolutely terrible idea it is. Understatement. Way to understate it, Lunduke. Over the decades, I've worked for multiple companies which produce computers or parts of computers in China, from laptops and cell phones to chips and cables, including like video game consoles and everything. It's always been more problems than it's worth. Import-export regulations with China, between them and almost every other nation, right? Going from China to the US, China to Germany, China to Japan, everywhere, are constantly in flux. Constantly. They can change weekly. And not just tariff adjustments like what we've been seeing this week. Those are easy to handle, right? Tariff adjustments, you just need a really good spreadsheet, and you just need to inform the people that handle your web store to set the price correctly, right? Those are simple adjustments to make. But also regulations around what can be built, what can be sold, when it can be sold, and to whom and by whom. I mean, it changes dramatically all the time. The possibilities of a trade war or a real war between China and neighboring countries like Taiwan or South Korea or Japan or so many others is always looming. And any of those things, a little bit of those things, a threat of those things could torpedo any expected shipments out of China. But here's the thing. Those are not the biggest issues. Those are huge issues. All those issues combined together by themselves make manufacturing in China a bad idea. But those are not the biggest issues. The reality is Chinese companies doing the bulk of the manufacturing of computer-related components are notoriously unreliable. Quality problems often resulting in entire shipments being defective, with getting refunds often impossible. Instability of the workforce, usage of what in most parts of the world would be called slave labor, and legal issues and weird other issues that relate to that. A lack of transparency, government control over the companies, and more all lead to wild unpredictability. All right, I want to stop there for a second. Because when I talk about quality problems, I'm not talking about little quality problems here. I worked at a laptop manufacturer once where we got a shipment from China, and things came, and instead of components being screwed into place properly with, proper Captain tapes and really actual proper design and proper hardware. There was hot glue. They literally just hot glued some pieces in there, and it not very much of it, so everything kind of fell apart. So literally, laptops started falling apart. I've seen boards not produced to spec. I've seen pieces falling out because they weren't properly soldered in. I've seen things where the whole backside of boards were just like a wall of solder. Right? Which so meant nothing worked. And if you made the mistake of turning it on, you just fried that whole darn thing. And there's just, it's so bad, there's just no fixing it, right? So when we're talking quality problems, it's obscene. And it's a really high percentage coming out of so many manufacturers. And I'm not talking about a couple. I'm talking about a wide range of big and small manufacturers. And it's just absolutely terrible. The unpredictability of the quality coming out of China of those components is dreadful for most manufacturers. And you see that in the quality of the components of certain manufacturers. And I'm not going to name names at the moment, but if you look at certain laptop manufacturers, you're like, okay, this is pretty bad quality of the hardware here. And that's one of the big reasons why. Now, all of this, right? All of this, and the government control over companies is a big deal. The Chinese Communist Party has a seat on most of these companies' boards, and that seat is an overriding seat. They can come in and say, you have to do whatever we want and do it on a dime, which means that if you sent patented and trademark specifications to be developed in a Chinese company, you probably lost it now. Other Chinese companies are now going to be developing it because China doesn't enforce those. They rampantly steal all those things constantly, and so many other issues. So unpredictability in pricing, timing, quantity, quality, and even legality. Under a critical, if you order a critical component of a laptop from a Chinese manufacturer, it is a roll of the dice. If you get it, you may not. You may not pay the price you agreed upon, right? And it may not work. In fact, I have had so many issues. I've had several stories where we ordered a component or an assembled piece from a Chinese manufacturer. And when they tell us it has finished, which was late in almost every case, they tell us that they won't ship it to us unless we pay more. Basically, they blackmail us. They extort it. They say, no, if you don't pay us 50% more, we won't ship it to you. There's no legal way we can fight against that. This is a Chinese company. What are we going to do? Sue them in U.S. court? There's not much to be done. We made the stupid mistake of dealing with a Chinese company. So now whatever they want, they can just get. And so, okay, well, if we don't get the parts, we can't ship. We told everyone we shipped. We already took orders. We need the parts. So we're just going to have to take the loss. Okay, so we pay for it. Now we get the components. We paid more than we needed to pay, than we should have paid. It took way longer, and now they've arrived, and 50% of them don't work. And the company won't give us a refund or make us any new ones. Yeah, that's a real thing. So it may not work. And if it doesn't work and the order is big enough, you likely won't get a full refund, which means you now will not be able to ship the product that you've been building with that component, right? It can torpedo an entire product line. And over the decades, I've worked with dozens of some of the largest component manufacturers and more than a few little ones across China. In the best of circumstances, the results have been good enough, but not great. Right? Those are the best. The best outcomes I've ever seen out of China were, well, they charge us what they said they would, and they got it to us a little late, but it arrived, and the quality's all right. That's the best. That's the shining example. On multiple occasions, entire product lines have been sunk or nearly sunk because of issues related to sourcing in China. Other times, we just literally lost money on product launches. Yet time and time again, manufacturers like Framework go back to China. The allure of cheap, bulk components often produced in substandard conditions with substandard materials is simply too much to pass up. And once again, we see one of the oh so many ways that sourcing these components in China will often come back to bite you. Production in any number of nations, from Canada and the United States to Japan or South Korea, is often, maybe and is often, more expensive. Usually not a crazy amount, but enough to make a difference. But you get what you pay for. And if the quality and reliability is important to your business, it's worth it. I wanted to put this out there because I keep seeing over and over again companies that are producing things in China and the quality is crap, or producing things in China and the prices are variable because of it. Or in this case with Framework, they made a weird stink about the tariffs that didn't really make sense. If they have a person at their company that tracks tariffs with a spreadsheet, and I'm sure they do because you have to do that, they knew that all they have to do is just adjust the pricing. They have to adjust the declared pricing and the retail pricing, and that's it. That's it. That's how you have to do it. Now, sometimes because of tariff changes, those pricing changes can be significant. I mean, they really can. I mean, a price from going from Taiwan to the United States, if Taiwan ends up having, let's say 30, 40% tariffs, that's a 30%, 40%, or sometimes even a little bit more change in the actual retail price of what you'll pay compared to what someone in a different country where those same tariffs don't exist. It's just the way it is. But making those adjustments is quick, easy, painless, and most importantly, done all the time. Framework, as I guarantee, going to make more adjustments to tariffs in the weeks ahead that have nothing to do with the United States. Because Taiwan and China and other countries in the EU and Canada and Australia will all be continually changing their tariffs on import tariffs with a variety of other countries that Framework does business with. So to claim that that the American tariffs specifically make it impossible. Oh, you can't. Oh, it's so hard. Oh, American tariff. No. That's a political statement. Or you're running cover for a different thing. Maybe you wanted to delay selling things to the US for a different reason, maybe a supply issue. Maybe you didn't know what you wanted to price things, so you just use this tariffs issue as a convenient scapegoat for, oh, we can't figure it out yet. Whatever. The reality is, practicality is, you've got the spreadsheet, you're fine. But doing the business in China, well, China's got you by the short and curlies, man. It is never a good idea, not ever, to do computer component manufacturing in China when you are, let's say, an American company. It doesn't go well. It just doesn't. Don't do it. Pay the extra money. Plan to have a 25% higher retail cost on your product, but your product will be better, higher quality, more reliable, easier to source, not produced by slaves. Oh my gosh, it's a win across the board. If you're truly looking to have a reliable, sustainable business with a quality product, you don't produce in China. You don't. Now, that's not saying that you can't get something produced by a company in China that has, a decent quality to it. It's not saying that. You absolutely can. There's a ton of companies doing this sort of manufacturing in China. But the problem is you really have no recourse. The few companies that can really pull this off, I still don't think it's a good idea, but the few companies that can do it are ones that have a lot of weight to throw around, like, Apple or Intel, right? If they've got enough weight to throw around, they can probably manage to get decent productivity. However, and decent quality. However, it's still ultimately, in my experience, going to be better for the company and the products being built if you can get that material built, those products and components built in a different nation. China's not a good place for it. It's just not. That's my spiel. That's my spiel about tariffs and computer production in China and all that sort of thing. I felt like it was just worth going on record with this because I'm seeing a lot of talk about these various topics by a lot of people that have never done any of this work. and I don't think it's possible for someone to really come out this from a just even-handed, let's do a good business, let's run a good tight ship point of view of let's build computers in China and think, oh, okay, this was a good idea. It's not a good idea. Also, the tariffs it's not actually going to cause you to not be able to ship to the United States or not. Anyone saying that, they're just making something up. That's not a real thing. Maybe it's a political stunt, but that's just a made up thing. Again, not saying tariffs are good, not saying tariffs are bad. Doesn't matter. It's irrelevant to this discussion. This is about practicality and what actually happens in a computer production company. Thank you to the Lunduke Journal subscribers for allowing me to rant about all this sort of thing from my past life. Go to lunduke.com, click on links. They're great links. You know you love to click on links. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, nerds, also nerdettes, we don't discriminate around here. I do declare end broadcast.